Well, at least it looks like Russia is pulling back troops from Ukraine's border, all while the Biden administration is working to cool things down through diplomacy. Joining us this morning to talk more about this is Dr. Olena Lennon, Adjunct Professor of Political Science and National Security at the University of New Haven. Good morning, Dr. Lennon.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So we thought Putin might invade Ukraine yesterday. It didn't happen. The U.S. says Russia is adding thousands of troops to the border, but the Kremlin says they're pulling back. So who do we believe? Are tensions really de-escalating over there, or is that just a red herring?
Indeed, there are conflicting messages all around. However, the narratives coming out of the Kremlin do not match the reality on the ground. The evidence that the intelligence services have picked up actually points to the opposite. Not only have the Russian troops not withdrawn or have begun the withdrawal, but they've actually added more troops in the last few days. And the withdrawal that the Ministry of Defense of Russia announced yesterday, or the day before yesterday, had to do with repositioning some troops that are permanently stationed near Ukraine's border anyway. So even if that was the actual withdrawal, they could easily redeploy those troops close to Ukraine's border. So we have not seen any significant de-escalation going on. As a matter of fact, things are only escalating. And there are three things that are particularly new as of today. One is that yesterday, Ukrainian forces reported new shelling in eastern Ukraine that could possibly be a pretext for a large-scale invasion. So things are actually escalating in eastern Ukraine, where pro-Russian forces are holding terrain as part of the so-called republics that are supported by Russia. So that's important context in terms of how the military situation is looking on the ground, but also political signals coming out of the Kremlin match what we see was happening with the military posture and the troop buildup. As the Kremlin continues to insist that the negotiations have failed, as Western leaders have not successfully met security demands that the Russians had been demanding. So what we're seeing is a pretty consistent political narrative coming out of the Kremlin that matches its military posture, and the possibility of an invasion is still very real. It's still imminent, and it could in fact happen on short notice.
Yeah, so you think it's probably, do you think it's probably or likely going to happen? It may not have happened yesterday, but it's likely going to happen?
Yes, absolutely. And that's what, again, the military situation on the ground and the troop buildup points in that direction. The level of mobilization and combat readiness is unprecedented. And in addition, as a matter of fact, not just the buildup itself, right? The 150 troops now have linked up with equipment that had been pre-positioned all around Ukraine, kind of encircling Ukraine from each direction since spring of last year. So this is not a new development. The Russians have been moving equipment to Ukraine's border for about 12 months now. So what we're seeing now is that the personnel is beginning to arrive and manning those equipments in preparation for an offensive. Now, the other thing that's indicative of an attack being imminent is that the key enablers for combat operations that military analysts typically look for example, field hospitals, engineering units, electronic warfare, they have all been put in place as well. So what we're seeing right now is that, the Russian troops are combat ready. The troop morale is quite low. The Russians are not in a position to maintain this level of forward deployed troops at Ukraine's border for a long time. So the decision has to be made very soon. The other thing that's important context for this is that we shouldn't forget that Russia started a large-scale military exercise with Belarus right on the border, on northern border of Ukraine, that is scheduled to end on February 20th. Now, the exercise is also unprecedented in its magnitude. including fighter jets, tanks, artillery, and infantry units that are about 100 miles away from the capital of Kiev, of Ukraine, Kiev. And that is one of the scenarios that is being considered right now as a very high possibility that that exercise will roll into a potential offensive on the capital of Ukraine, because it's only 100 miles away, and it could be a matter of hours that Russian equipment or airstrikes could begin, followed by ground troops and cyber attacks. So it's all very real. We're not seeing any signs of de-escalation, and as a matter of fact. Again, if you look at the context of the situation, political messaging, military posture, and further, sort of rhetoric coming out of the Kremlin as the West and Ukraine not willing to meet them halfway, then it all adds up to a pretty ominous picture.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. Dr. Lennon, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.